Okay, cool. So this meeting is being
Yes,
recorded.
I just started.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. So I have, I think, 12 or 13 slides, and the first 7 are actually cover the first agenda item, and that is providing everyone with a background of where we're at with SCAN and North American museums in terms of who has what specimens and how much has been digitized. And so we may not even get through the the entire agenda. This is probably a meeting I should have had even a year ago. I believe this is the first general SCAN meeting we've had since the very first one in August of 2012. And if anybody wants to stop me and say anything, just put something in the chat box, or feel free to ask a question in the chat box as I'm moving along. And so this might be more of a sort of an update as opposed to a discussion. If it is, then I'm happy to arrange more follow-up meetings. I would hope there would be enough interest in this and SCAN and arthropod digitization in general that people would want to have more meetings, SCAN meetings. So first I'm going to provide a review of SCAN, then I'm going to talk about at least what I'm doing, what we're doing at NAU for priorities for SCAN in 2017. Third, I'll talk a little bit about what I think would be really wonderful if people could help, and on a number of these I put whether there's any funding associated with it or not. Then I'll talk about the role of LepNet, our current TCN. Then I'll go over some of the issues associated with hosting observation data, specifically iNaturalist data, and private collections. And then if there's any time left, then I'll open it up to questions and feedback if there's questions that have not that haven't been answered during the meeting. Okay, so just to remind everybody, SCAN and our LepNet data portal, they both share the same database, so it doesn't really matter that much. The LepNet portal does have specific information just for Lepidoptera, but for the most part, they're the same portal. And so we first started off in 2012 as a Southwest collection of arthropods network. We had about 20 collections involved, and we were focused primarily on ground-dwelling taxa. We've since grown to become the Symbiota collection of arthropods network, and currently we've got about 86 collections that have active or relatively active collections on SCAN. Only 90 more to go, although most of those 90 are relatively small collections. We've got most of the important collections. The focus is still on North America, so we're focused on North American specimens, and we're focused on North American museums, although if you look at SCAN, it's relatively flexible, and we're hosting data from around the world, but the focus is still on North America. And the goal is to digitize an image all 275 million North American specimens. So I'm hopeful that my granddaughter or grandson will finish that before they pass on to the next life. And also to remind people that SCAN is a Symbiota portal, and I've put in red LepNet and SCAN and how we function. So we function as a portal that can bring data in from a variety of different databases. And we also function as a data provider software. So Symbiota itself is a software for putting in data and annotating data, and but it also acts as sort of an intermediary aggregator with iDigBio and GBIF. And My plan is to continue trying to host as much North American data as possible, and I'm perfectly fine with it being redundant with GBIF and iDigBio, and they know this, and they both support this. And the main thing is we simply don't provide data to any of these aggregators if it's being provided through another mechanism. So if a museum has their own IPT and we get data from them, we do not serve that data to GBIF or iDigBio. And the reason why I don't care if it's redundant and I want to put all arthropod data on scan is to provide a very easy focus for people to just focus on arthropod data. And we create this portal to maximize the efficiency for visualizing and packaging arthropod data. This shows the distribution of collections and the number of specimens in North America from Canadian, United States, and Mexican collections. And really most of the challenges on the United States. So of the 275 million North American specimens, 255 million of those are in U.S. Collections. And actually now I just forgot what the red bar for the that's number of collections. So far we have in scan data from about 82 collections. Like I said, we need to reach out to the remaining 100 collections to try to sort of bring them in from the cold. And there's some collections that will never probably participate in this, and but I'd like to think by 2020 that most of the collections will have initiated digitization and participated in digitizing their collections. And then the red simply just shows the number of specimens that we have digitized so far. So obviously it's going to be a huge challenge to get all 255 million specimens. I didn't put red marks in Canada or Mexico. Mexico, as I'll mention in a little bit, is definitely going to be one of my focuses for 2017 and trying to connect with them much more than we are now. But having said that, they've already got about 1 million of their around 3 million specimens already database. So they've actually done a great job, and I'm hoping to get all of their data integrated into SCAN by midsummer. There are more collections in Canada, and I believe there are about 29 million specimens, and Canadensis is taken over the role of trying to mobilize Canadian data. But once again, I'm going to reach out to individual Canadian museums to have them participate in SCAN. And one of the major data providers in SCAN is University of Alberta. They've an amazing, wonderful database, wonderful contributors. So timeline, by the way, so LepNet ends in 2020. So we'll have no dedicated funding unless we continue to get Penn grants. And then the last TCN Penn funded through the ADBC program will end in 2024. And so already there's discussion amongst not just the entomology communities, but all of the, throughout all the museum communities in both North America and globally about how do we sustain this effort? How do we start planning now for, let's say, what is going to replace ADBC, if anything, when it ends? So part of this talking about this now is I really want to have the entomology community really start thinking about this. This just shows This is a graph to emphasize the importance of museums, and so what I've done is I've done an accumulation curve showing the number of specimens in millions on the y-axis and the number of arthropod museums on the x-axis. And I only took it to 140 museums because even if I stretch it out to 182, it doesn't matter. And it is important to know that the top 10 museums account for 52% of the specimens, and the top 51 museums in terms of size, ones that have over 1 million, they account for 93% of all of the specimens that we need to grab. By the time you get to including museums that have over 250,000 specimens, you've accounted for essentially 99% of all the specimens that are out there. And I think, maybe, I thought I had it's not showing up. What's not showing on this graph is this not only goes from the largest museums to the smallest museums, it also goes from museums that have the largest percentage of non-North American specimens to museums that are essentially just North American. So the distinction is not just in size, it's the emphasis as to where their specimens are. And a lot of these really small collections are, I would argue, and other people would argue, are very important because they, in a lot of cases, they do the best job in capturing local to regional biodiversity. A lot of the federal collections fall into this, the smaller collections. So I think it's a really important group. I think all the collections are important, but in just thinking about where we are at, one of the things that I would propose is thinking about at least two different strategies. One for large. Oh, here it is. It shows up. Finally, it shows up. That's right. I needed to click this. So these small collections, there's a lot of them. They don't represent that many specimens in terms of percentage, but they provide really important representation. This provides for additional graphs showing just the United States collections. And what I've done is I've divided them into 4 groups: collections that have over 3 million, collections that have 1 to 3 million, collections that have 1 million to 100,000, and then small collections, the ones that are less than 100,000. And so if you look at the percentage of collections, most of the collections are small collections. The largest collections, is 23, a relatively small amount. If you look at the percentage of U.S. specimens, these largest collections really make up the lion's share of the specimens. And, and a large part of that is Smithsonian, but it's not just Smithsonian. There are 22 other large collections that really do matter. And so it really does drop off after that. So large collections, 1 to 3 million, account for a relatively small percentage of the specimens relative to the largest ones. And then medium collections, 16 million, and then small collections, less than 1 million. In terms of what's been digitized already in terms of percentage of their collection that's been digitized, small collections have the best record. The average small collection has digitized 25% of their collection, and it goes down. And so the largest collections have the lowest percentage of their specimens digitized. And so I think this really speaks to the fact that for a lot of these largest collections, as you get larger, you have larger departments, you have more policies in place, you have more personalities involved. There's just lots of different reasons why you develop inertia in preventing you from digitizing. And so that's one of the reasons why I think that even though the ADBC program has been great, I mean, if we want to think to the future in terms of just getting data, I think the larger collections, we really have to target a strategy that does work for them, and I don't have an answer. Now, in terms of percent of the collections digitizing, it might seem a little bit non-intuitive, but most of the largest collections have started digitizing, and only 40% of the small ones have digitized. And so how do you reconcile this number with this number over here where the small collections on average have digitized 25% of their collections? I mean, some of the small collections have done a really great job. They're close to 100% digitization or very, very high. So even with small collections, though, most of them have not started digitizing. So for small collections, it's a different challenge than for large collections. Large collections have initiated digitization, but they don't have very much digitized. Small collections, there's still a lot of collections out there that we need to get on board. So, and so this just shows the progress since the initiation of the ADBC program. So this, I think, is really promising. Now, there was data, prior to when I started tracking it here in 2013, but except for a few museums like Kansas, a lot of this stuff was not really made public, even through GBIF. And regardless, I just think that we've made a huge amount of progress going from, less than 1 million readily available, publicly available data to now over 10 million data records that are available. And then I've highlighted here in numbers where some key either projects or institutions have been very important in adding to the overall database. This, by the way, so this shows a map of all of the occurrence data. This actually isn't the most recent one, but once again, it shows that we don't have uniform distribution of occurrence records, and there are definitely certain areas, not only the United States, like Nevada really sticks out, but other areas in, obviously, Alaska, Canada, where you can actually see roads, highways, just by where insects have been collected. And the same is true in Mexico. But overall, it's great. We have, now we're actually close to 11 million records. Invert eBase, by the way, if you've never been to, they've got a data portal. They're a separate TCN. They are shipping all of their arthropod data to SCAN, and we're trying to encourage everybody and anybody to ship non-arthropod invertebrate data to their portal, especially mollusks. And they, for example, have a wonderful mollusk database already. Most of our records have been georeferenced, so that's really, really great. 5% image, that's to be expected. I think the biggest challenge, and something that the ADBC program does not cover at all, is identification. So it is tough only having 56% identified to species. Now, some of this might be due to the way our taxon tables are set up. So this might be a little bit of an underestimate, but my guess is even if we went through everything with a fine-tooth comb, that I'd be surprised if it was over like 62% identified. So that is a challenge that we need to address. But in terms of taxonomic distribution, it's really good. 4,000 families, 25,000 genera, and 146,000 species. 82 museums, and there are about 400 collections that are providing data. And the reason why it's 400 is through these AMNH projects, the three ones, the American Bee Project, the Tritrophic Project, and the PBI Project. They've collected small amounts of data from all over the world on North American data. And then we have 3 observation data sets. We have iNaturalist, and then we've got a set of 20 moth, what we call observation data. They're actually specimens that will probably, well, we'll be lucky if we get 10% of those specimens actually cataloged. And then just recently, BYU deposited a very nice odonate observation collection. And once again, they're actual specimens, but it may be 10 years or more before they actually get cataloged and properly put into the system. By the way, can everybody hear me still? Okay, good.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks. So now I just kind of I wanted to go through the priorities that that I'm directly involved in working on, and this is actually not prioritized as whatever popped into my head. So first, I really do want to organize. Well, actually, I want to organize all data by collections. And so part of this is when data is put into either GBIF or iDigBio or scanned by projects, you just have no sense of really where those specimens came from. It's hard to track them, annotate them. And really the 3 big collections in SCAN that need to be redistributed are the Tritrophic, the American Bee Collection, and the PBI, all projects from American Museum of Natural History. And I think it's good for every institution also to have it that way because, for example, Oregon State still has quite a few specimens in several of these AMNH projects, and I think it should actually be attributed to the institution that's producing the data, not the projects. And iDigBio feels the same way. And so, but it is going to take time to do this because we're going to have to break up all of the data into different institutions and put them into the collections that we think they belong, and then repost them to iDigBio. And then I would simply just make a plea for future projects, unless there's a really good reason. Ideally, everything is attributed to the collection that the data is in. Now, one obvious example, if you haven't heard about it, is Nico Fran's artist collection. That's a collection that he's made that consists of specimens that people have on loan, and for one reason or another, it's a problem applying good institutional catalog numbers to that. I don't want to talk about that here, especially with Nico not being able to make the meeting, but that will definitely be something to discuss in a future meeting. So cleaning and annotating data for live collections. And just to reiterate, a live collection, as I define it, is any collection in SCAN where we serve your data to the world as a Darwin Core archive. And that means it doesn't matter how you get the data into SCAN. It could be an Excel spreadsheet or something else. But once it's in SCAN, that's where you annotate it. That's where you either delete records or change records or add to records. And then we send that to iDigBio. And then obviously one of my other goals is to get everybody to ship their data to GBIF. Now, the reason why this is in reference to live collections is we can annotate data for collections that maintain their own database, but the best we can do is send an email to that collection, tell them there's something wrong with their data. They correct it on their end, and then the next time we harvest their data, we get a clean record. So we've done that a number of times with AntWeb, and it actually works. So Brian Fisher is really good about noting the problems and getting them fixed. And I actually just did it a couple of days ago with University of Alberta, and for small things that works pretty good. But it does require an extra step, or actually two, to then update the data. So it's important to realize that each collection is independent. But I think that it is efficient to tackle some problems as a group. So I'm throwing this out there as a proposition that, for example, Ben, I believe, and you can correct me, he can on the back end change everybody's country from whatever it is to United States. United States is the accepted term for country. And so if everybody agreed, yeah, Ben, you can go in and change that, then we can do it in one fell swoop. Potentially filling out fields like, is it a pin specimen? And this could be something, I think, where there's a group of collections that all say, okay, we trust Kat Chapman to go in and fill out pinned under preparation method for all of these specimens. And we know she's smart enough to know that you don't pin a spider or something in alcohol, so she doesn't fill in that field. The same is true for georeferencing, and we did this. Now, Kat, I can't remember. Oh, you did it for University of New Mexico. So we put her on as an editor for UNM because she was just good at batch georeferencing, and Sandy Brantley, paid her directly, and she whipped out a lot of records for UNM. And I'm not selling Kat. It can be anybody, but in doing these projects, really good people emerge at being really good at certain things. And my guess is there's probably several people in our community that are really good at georeferencing. And so what I'm saying is we should really communicate this to everybody, and if somebody is available to help one or more other collections with what I call batch annotation, I would really like to see that happen. Okay, so next, connecting with Mexico. So we do have two collections on scan. I don't think they've actually entered any records, but we've had several correspondences with UNAM, and that's mostly where the specimen data is. But we've also been corresponding with Soberon, Jorge Soberon from Kansas. He's been trying to connect us with Canabio and other collections in Mexico. And this isn't just to connect on just the level of sharing data. I'd like to see connections in just sharing information on field projects that you might have with somebody. So Jen Zaspel said that she was initiating, I think, a collection joint project in Mexico this spring and summer, because we really have, from a scan perspective, almost no connection with Mexico. And for, let's say, the LepNet North America project, I think minimum estimates of new taxa that we would add, like 10 or more percent, they're all from Mexico. And my guess is that's true with a lot of other taxa. So if you are doing any kind of work in Mexico, if you have Mexican colleagues either in Mexico or the United States or elsewhere, feel free to send me their names, and we'll, because I want to form a loose working group to move this forward. We do have one active Pen Award in SCAN, OrthopNet, from ANSP, and so that's, after we take care of the indirects, it's going to be about $18,000 that we have to spend over the next couple of years to basically deal with basic things like enhancing the entry form field, maybe even providing multiple versions of the entry forms, providing the ability to track data use, whatever. But I just want to say hats off to ANSP for providing that money for the, well, and specifically that money also has to allow ANSP to participate in the TCN. And so we are doing that as well. But by doing that, they will also make SCAN a better data portal as a result. It is going to be a priority to promote the use of data in research. And this, I think, is going to be, well, hopefully it's not just LepNet driven, but more and more the message from NSF to everybody is we need to start seeing publications. And that's because they have pressure on them to produce. They're already planning for post-ADBC. The last theme, I think, for, you know, where's the funding going to go for the post-ADBC era? And right now it's you know, complex data. It's integrating different kinds of data sets into various kinds of research publications. And I think we have enough data for a lot of groups to really start pumping out publications. And we probably should take better advantage of publications like Biodiversity Data Journal, but I'm also open to, like at NAU, our library told me last week we could create our own journal if we wanted. Now they won't provide DOI numbers, but if it's a matter of people being frustrated with going through a long peer review process, I'm open to helping remove that constraint to get good data and good publications out there. But in addition to the Lepidoptera, I think all 5 of the original scan taxa have critical mass for publications. Ants, carabid beetles, tenebrioniid beetles, spiders, and grasshoppers. There's, if they're not all around 100,000, they're close to it. So there's maybe not enough data to work with for let's say an entire family, but definitely at the generic level, there's a lot of taxa that there's just basically data that are waiting to be incorporated into a research publication. Now, the one thing I don't have on here is bees, and bees are the #1 digitized taxa in SCAN. I can't remember how many, but it's I think it's at least a couple of million. It's huge. Even in a relative sense, I think they're comparable to butterflies, which butterflies probably have the most number of records on a relative basis, but there's only 600 species of butterflies. I do want to, I think we can do this, provide service for compiling complete data sets together. So even though I say we're trying to be redundant in terms of data that we get from SCAN, GBIF, and iDigBio, Lindsay, who works with me, has developed scripts for easily querying GBIF. So I think we're close to 100% overlap with iDigBio, less so with GBIF. And if anybody wants to, if you have an idea for a research project and you want to get put a complete data set together and you think you might want help, let me know, and we'll try to run some scripts for you to provide you with complete data. Oh, I actually jumped the gun. Applying DOI-like system for data sets. So we don't have the ability to provide DOI designations like GBIF does for data sets, and neither does iDigBio. It costs money to do that. But it is going to be important for me to try to provide people with the ability for attribution. So if you send your data to GBIF and somebody gets your data from GBIF, they'll get a DOI number and attribute you. If they get data from SCAN, we don't have a system like that in place. And that's the one drawback in having SCAN, is because you don't have a system as good as GBIF for trying to make sure that there's attribution. The same is true for iDigBio. They don't give out DOI numbers for record sets, but I think but they do have a system for recording data sets. So it is a priority for me to make sure that everybody's happy that something like that exists in SCAN, and that hopefully we're all talking to other people that host data to make sure that regardless of where somebody gets data and uses it in a publication, that it's easy for them to know who to attribute. And actually that covers the fourth one, tracking data and ensuring attribution. So I guess last, I do want to develop an education portal, and actually Ann Basham from ASU and I are working with some educators here at NAU to go after NS subfunding to do exactly that. And it's somewhat linked in with a local program we have where we're setting up pitfalls to monitor ground-dwelling arthropods, and we're putting out bee blocks for pollinators, and so working on a on-the-ground project with local schools. And then what I'm hoping to do is to tie that into what I would call an education portal, where kids can put data into the portal and nobody's going to use their data, but they actually have a sense of ownership where they can put their own data in, but then they can also get data from SCAN portal and other portals if they need it. So I'm going to run through this last part really quick. So I really would like to engage people. We definitely could use help in adding to the basic IDAS tables that are already in SCAN. I think most collections ask their technicians or students to do verbatim transcribing for labels, and that means that they will most likely be entering taxa in that are no longer accepted, and so we could use help cleaning up some of these old names that have been put into the taxonomy tables. It'd be great to see people help develop checklists like the botanists have done, and specifically Steve Buckley from the Park Service. And here I show a bunch of thumbnails of checklist documents that he's created that he thinks has been really useful in terms of being inserted into the National Park Service management decisions. He also uses it for education and outreach, and just to share information with other botanists. And we already have, we have, I think most of the parks in SCAN, we have checklists. They're just not complete. And other people have more complete checklists. I'd like to see more people get involved in this, because I think it's a great way to package information for consumption, whether it's K-12 education or land managers. We could definitely use help with more people doing identification checking, just going on to SCAN and making sure that somebody's called a certain taxa really is that. And I've already talked about this before, georeferencing. Could really use help in at least helping some institutions that are challenged by getting their stuff georeferenced. And then once again, selecting a research area and working on it, whether it's question-based, taxon-based, or region-based. Okay, and finally, so just the role of LepNet and other projects in supporting SCAN through 2020. So we have at least 10K in basic portal support per year that we can use, that we'll use from LepNet. Now, that really has to go towards LepNet, but by default it supports all of the databases, the collections in SCAN. It covers Ben and the little amount of programming and back-end support. He's actually funded through other projects to develop added value to SCAN. So right now he's covered on a sub-award from the macroalgae TCN to add spatial modeling components to SCAN. And Kat Chapman, who's in Gainesville, and Lindsay, who's here in Flagstaff, will be able to provide some front-end support. Nichelle and Vanessa, who's here in NAU, will help me with the Mexico project. And so basically, it's not a lot of support, but I think it's stable support at least through 2020, and that's a good thing. So we can get other support through other TCNs if they decide to participate, and other pens, and then through other sources of funding. So Chris Daly from UC Santa Cruz got a ICMM grant, and it's he put into I think $2,000 just to support us to help him on SCAN, but that $2,000 is going to help support everybody. So we have enough support. We probably can't have too much support. So if you get a grant that can support these efforts either directly or indirectly, it's greatly appreciated. And okay. So now talking about hosting observation data, iNaturalist and non-catalog specimens, and then private collections. And iDigBio does not harvest any of these data, so the only places that they're found is on SCAN. So the challenges and opportunities presented regarding iNaturalist is we don't have a mechanism for easily filtering iNaturalist data, and we estimate that about 10% of arthropods can be identified if you have an image, location, and date. But iNaturalist users are a very enthusiastic group, and they tend to over-identify arthropods. And so this really came up with an issue with Paula, and so Paula, and Paula can correct me, but I don't know if she was suggesting we remove iNaturalist data. We don't right now have the ability to really filter iNaturalist data. So let's say spider data. We just say we will not accept any iNaturalist spider data if it's identified the species. The lowest level that will accept that data is genus. So we don't have that ability. The best we can do is put it in with observation data where it's at. So you actually have to select it if you really want to use it. You can accidentally select it, but it's really easy to not select it. You simply select specimen data if you're looking at data. I put something on the front of Symbiotis saying that we are hosting iNaturalist data. I've contacted iNaturalists, and they, regarding this and how can we move forward. And I'll just say that right now, there's not an easy way to move forward and communicate with the two groups. There are some people that cross over, several people at Cal Academy that are very supportive of iNaturalist. Norm Penny, for example. But what I'm hoping is that we'll actually come together as two communities, and so we will figure out ways to use these citizen scientists more effectively, including getting them to actually collect specimens, because I think a lot of them would be more than happy to collect specimens. And on the other end, to us as a scientific community to invite them into SCAN and let them provide data. And I will say this, I think almost 50% of the images that we have are from iNaturalist. A lot of really good groups that we've got, we only have images from iNaturalist. And then it might have been luck of the draw, but I just picked this one species, as pleasing fungus beetle, that we have in scan. And if you look on the map, the green are specimen data and the red are iNaturalist data. And most of the records we have are from iNaturalist. And we would not have a good sense of this species distribution without iNaturalist records. Now, this is actually an easy one because there's only one species in the genus in the United States. So there's a lot more problematic ones. But so the current solution is to keep these records, make them easily separated, and make the necessary qualifiers. And what I want to work towards is to, if we can, make filters. I have no problem with that. And work with the iNaturalist community to develop a relationship and make their data better. So Paula, if you have the microphone, if you want to say anything, go ahead.
Neil, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
That sounds fine as long as the data, iNaturalist data, can be separated out. And yeah, I got nothing else.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, and can you mute? Oh, you're muted. Good. So it is separated, and so the default right now is you select specimens and observations. And I think, and I asked Ben if we could have the default be that when you do a search, that you only select specimens. And I think Ben said that wasn't too hard, but a lot of things in scan are not just scan. They affect all of the Symbiota portals. And I don't know if this...
Can I add one thing? It might be good to add a caveat to the data site itself to warn users, general users, that they should treat iNaturalist observations with a grain of salt.
Okay, yeah, and we can do that. So, like I said, I do have something on the front. We can put something in their data description, and I can just pass that by Kenichi. He's the one that owns their collection, and see if he's fine with that. But I think one easy solution for me is, by default, you select specimens, so you don't have to think about it. So you really have to actively go to the observations. And there might be some other place on the data portal that we can put this qualifier, not just for iNaturalist, but for all of the observations. Because technically, none of the observations, is there any ability right now to, let's say, go confirm that that's really fact? The good thing is, I do know that for Chris's and Kelly Richter's 20 moth databases, they're very, very confident about those identifications, and Sean is very confident about the odornate ones. And then private collections, I think they're only a challenge so far, in that we have very few private collectors that they've set up collections, but they haven't really contributed. So everybody that sets up a private collection, I know I do have a conversation with them about what will happen to your collection if you die tomorrow. So do you have an institution that will take on your collection if something happens to you? And so, I mean, everybody has given me really good responses. Like they definitely do have some institution that will take over their collection. I'd actually like to see more private collections if they met some, standard like that. And as a community, we can maybe more formalize that. But so far, it hasn't been an issue. So Sandy said, I worked with some iNaturalist people at the BioBlitz at a couple of parks for the Centennial. She'll keep working with the public to be inclusive, but also explain how hard it is to make arthropod IDs without specimens. Yeah, and so the National Park Service now relies on iNaturalist for their BioBlitzes. And in one sense, that's my perspective, that's not good because it encourages them to simply take pictures or make observations. They record them on iNaturalist, and the National Park Service is happy. And so I definitely am hoping that there can be some communication like Sandy is providing to people at these BioBlitzes that it's not good enough for a lot of groups, for most groups, to simply take an image. And like I said, I think a lot of people, if you said, what if I gave you a vial with some alcohol or, a kill jar, and I'll pick up the specimens, would you mind collecting them or bring them into the museum next time you come? And so I would like to see that. Okay, so questions or feedback on future meetings and needs?
One suggestion I had in terms of funding can you hear me okay? Or should I type?
Oh, Paul, I could hear you, but maybe it was just me. I couldn't hear the rest of what you said. I only heard the first.
I could hear you, but maybe it was just me. I couldn't hear the rest of what you said. I only heard the first.
I was just going to say, Arctos, in terms of long-term funding of SCAN, Arctos requires a monetary contribution per collection that contributes to the consortium every year, and the amount that they require per institution depends on how many records they're supporting from that institution. And I'm just wondering if we want to consider implementing something like that so that each year the bigger museums with the bigger collections will provide some level of
No, I think that's an excellent suggestion, and so I think the next step then is to survey collections and, well, find out exactly what the Arctos model is. It's obviously sustainable because I've not heard any collection complain about the dues that they pay, and find out, what's the system and whether we can implement it. So it's amazing. So the Arabidopsis group has something like that. They charge collections, and it makes me jealous because I think their budget is over $1 million a year just in subscription fees. Okay, are there any other comments, suggestions, whatever?
Paul again. Is there a compelling reason why
I'll wait for
we
Christy
don't
to finish typing.
push out all of our scan data to GBIF?
I would argue that it's a by institution decision. I think it does make us look better as a community because we're fully participating with the designated global aggregator. So GBIF is still the designated global aggregator. And I would not, I mean, who knows? But I'd be a little surprised if NSF funded iDigBio data portal beyond 2024 as long as GBIF exists. So GBIF is the global aggregator. I think it makes every institution look better by sending their data to GBIF as well.
Push all of our data. Is there a compelling objection to that?
Pushing all it. Is that, I don't think there's any. I don't know of anybody objecting to pushing their data to GBIF. It is going to require, because of the way GBIF does business, it will require each institution to, for example, make sure that if they do have data on GBIF, that they tell GBIF to either delete it, clean it up, and then they Ben, you can remind me, they have to actively initiate a collection on GBIF just like they did with Scan. But it's really a very, for most collections, especially if you don't have data on GBIF, it's silly. I think you could do it in a day. The biggest drawback would simply be getting the biggest GBIF.
Yeah, that's
GBIF.
Actually, that's
absolutely correct.
Sorry. So the way SCAN is set up right now, each individual institution that is part of our consortium has to go in and has to click that we want our data pushed out to GBIF. My question is, why can't we just universally push all the consortium collections out there?
Ben, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So, Paula, GBIF, when we set up the capacity within Symbiota to publish to GBIF, the folks at GBIF that we worked with very specifically explained to us that they much prefer institutions as well as collections in that institution to identify themselves of where the data is coming from. And so pushing a data set just en masse from SCAN to GBIF isn't really the way GBIF would like to receive data. They, and partly so in order to provide adequate attribution to each of the institutions that are digitizing this data. And so there is, in order to publish to GBIF, you do have to first determine whether your institution is already registered with GBIF, and if not, go through their, I believe it's the endorsement process, which is fairly straightforward. A few institutions have already done this in SCAN, and it has been a fairly straightforward process. GBIF is also very adamant that we don't send duplicate records to them, and that's where we really need each institution to be able to handle if they do have records in GBIF, to handle that on their own, because we really aren't getting any funding in order to assist every institution in publishing to GBIF, and some situations can be rather complicated with previous or records from the past of a given institution already in GBIF, and at that point, really, it's up to the institution that originally published that data set to clear up those issues. So it can get rather complicated. Does that answer your question?
Well, so let me jump in here. So Paula, yeah, in one Okay, so Paul is telling me to go ahead. So I agree that it would be nice if we could just ship all of the data to GBIF just like we do now for iDigBio for anybody that has a live collection in Scan. And even though, yeah, it's a hassle, it means that you as an individual collection are going to have to engage GBIF. But I think Stylos did it for what the University of Kentucky had. It just took them a couple of hours. It really wasn't that big of a deal. In your case, I mean, we can talk about your specific case, Paula, because I think if you have any problem at all, it's that you already.
As far as I know, I've already done it. You sent me directions. I think I've given permission to push my part of the DMNS data out to GBIF. If it's not happening, then apparently I didn't do it correctly. I can't do anything about the duplicate records that exist on GBIF because those came from a server that's dead, and I don't actually care if there are duplicate records on GBIF. So to me, that's not really, they're literally duplicate records, so that's not that important to me. So if my data is not being pushed out, then it might be good, and this addresses Christy's question, for you to resend directions how we as individuals can start pushing our data out.
Okay, that sounds good, and I can do a quick check on GBIF after we get off. And then, so Ben, do we have a quick guide?
We do have that one pager. I actually tried to find it in our yours and my Dropbox the other day, and I couldn't locate it. But there is the one pager on publishing to GBIF. I'm sure I can find it in my emails, and it's most likely saved somewhere.
Okay, and then I'll send that out through email, and then I'll put it on the at least the LepNet.org site. So right now we're not using the Scan project site. We're moving over to WordPress, and I just haven't created a Scan WordPress site. So most of all of the updates right now we're just putting on LepNet.org. But we'll do that, Christy and Paula. Okay, so let me just end by saying, believe it or not, next Wednesday we're having another Adobe Connect meeting. And even though it's specifically to get some of the LepNet collections on board, it might be good for a lot of different people to participate. It's going to go over digitization, data ingestion, data serving, how to deal with messy data, data that you're not sure which field it goes into, you're not sure what a certain Darwin core term really means, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, we'll record that if you can't make it so you can watch it later. And with that, I will end this meeting. We're 4 minutes over. So unless there are no more questions, we'll end and see you whenever.